Hello dear scholars, welcome to yet another interesting class in history. In today's class, you will learn about the key personalities in Songhai Empire and the various functions that they performed in the empire. And under this topic, we are going to identify the key personalities and discuss their functions in Songhai Empire. Songhai Empire was the largest of all the empires that existed in sub-Saharan Africa, and it was unique in so many ways. Firstly, the empire ran a clan-based economy in which one's family or clan would largely determine one's occupation. Now, agriculture, taxes, tributes, and trade were the pillars of the economy of Songhai Empire, and some of the commodities that were traded in the empire at the time under study include gold, slaves, kola nuts, horses, linen, woolen cloths, cowries, luxury goods, salt, and so on. Now, secondly, the major source of revenue for the empire were taxes or tributes that came in from provinces and vassal states. They also had taxes on trade commodities that passed through its territory, natural resources that were extracted within its territory, and the sales of proceeds from royal farms. These all boost the economy of Songhai Empire. Now, talking about the various personalities or the key personalities in Songhai Empire, the first we are going to discuss today is the king. The king was a supreme monarch who acted as the head of state. He also performed the role of the head of government. The king was also the chief commander of the armed forces, and he was the head of the Supreme Court of the territory. Now, discussing some of the functions of the king, first we are going to discuss today is political leadership. The king served as the central authority and the supreme leader of the empire. The king made decisions on matters of governance, policy, and state affairs. Number 2, military commander. The king served as the supreme commander of the Songhai military forces. He led the Songhai army during times of war. He planned military campaigns and made strategic decisions regarding defense and the expansion of the empire. Number 3, economic control. The king had control over the economic resources of the empire, and the king regulated trade. He levied taxes and managed the distribution of land and resources. The king also oversaw the important trans-Saharan trade routes, which brought wealth and prosperity to the Songhai Empire. A fourth function of the king we are going to discuss today is religious authority. The king held religious significance, and he was considered the spiritual leader of the empire. He patronized Islamic scholars and played significant roles in the spread of Islam. Number 5, diplomacy and foreign relations. The king represented the empire in diplomatic matters and maintained relations with neighboring states and foreign powers. The king negotiated treaties, alliances, and trade agreements to protect the interests of Songhai Empire. Another key personality we will discuss today is the ministers. The ministers held important positions within the government, and they played key roles in assisting the king in the administration and the governance of the empire. The ministers were appointed by the king to assist the king in the implementation of imperial policies and the supervision of regional governors. There were different departments in the Songhai Empire, and each department or ministry was headed by a minister. Now, before we look into the different departments, let us first talk about the overall responsibilities of the ministers in the empire at the time. And one of the functions of the ministers was advisory roles. Ministers provided counsel and advice to the king on various matters of state. They offered their expertise and knowledge to help the king make good decisions on political, economic, and military affairs. Number 2, administrative duties. Ministers were responsible for overseeing specific departments or areas of administration within the empire. They managed the day-to-day operations, implemented policies, and ensured the smooth functioning of their respective ministries. Number 3, judicial functions. Some ministers were involved in the administration of justice. They served as judges or legal advisors, assisting the king in resolving disputes and interpreting the law. Number 4, financial management. Ministers were entrusted with financial matters including tax collection, revenue allocation, and fiscal planning. They worked to ensure the empire's financial stability and oversees the treasury. Military leadership. Certain ministers held military positions and they assisted the king in organizing and leading the army. They participated in military campaigns, strategized for battles, and managed the defense of the empire. Now, talking about the different departments in the Songhai Empire, recall I said earlier that each department was headed by a minister, and we had different departments or different ministries in the empire. There were ministers in charge of finance, who was also referred to as Katisi Farmer or Kalisi Farmer. And this minister ensured that the finance of the king and by extension the finance of the empire was used judiciously. The Minister of Finance also made suggestions on possible new sources of revenue to the king. There was also the Minister of Farming issues, and this minister was also referred to as Fari Mundia, and he ensured that there were policies targeted at the improvement of farming, and he also designed policies to improve farming. Another minister we will discuss today is the Minister of Forestry Issue, who was also called Sao Farmer. The Sao Farmer designed and implemented, with the approval of the king, policies to ensure proper sustainable management of forest resources. There was also the minister in charge of Department of Justice, who was also called Asari Mundia, and he ensured that the laws of the land was enforced according to the Islamic Sharia law or the tradition. They also had the minister in charge of purchase of the royal family's items, who was also called the farmer. The D farmer ensured that the needs of the first family were purchased and kept for use at the appropriate time. He also saw to it that there was purchase confirmed with the status and the tastes of the members of the first family. The first family here simply means the royal family. And lastly, we'll talk about the wage issues minister, who was also referred to as the Bara farmer. And the Bara farmer made budgetary proposal to the king for the wages of the empire's employees, and he also secured approval and made payment of wages at the right time. Alright, so far we've discussed two major personalities or two key personalities in Songhai Empire. We've talked about the king, we've also discussed the ministers. Now let's talk about the governors or the head of vassal states. The governors were appointed by the king to act on his behalf in a given region or province. In some territories, the king allowed the traditional ruler of such a place to continue to rule his people, but they were to pay tribute to Gao. Number one of the functions of the governors include political administrations. The governors were responsible for the overall governance and administration of their respective regions or provinces, and they represented the king's authority, and they ensured the implementation of central policies and decisions within their jurisdiction. Number 2, they helped to maintain law and order in their region or within their region. Number 3, they helped in tax collection and revenue generation. The governors played a crucial role in the collection of taxes and other forms of revenue within their regions. They ensured that taxes were collected efficiently and fairly, and they supervised local officials that were involved in revenue generation. Number 4, defense and security. Governors were responsible for the defense and the security of their regions. They organized and maintained local military forces by ensuring that the empire, their region, was well protected. They also helped in ensuring the readiness and the protection of their territories against external threats or rebellion, and they also helped in supervision of local rebellion. The governors also acted as the head of provincial justice system. They also performed the duties of the head of government on behalf of the king in their territories. The governors also helped in economic development. Now, governors promoted economic development within their region. They oversaw agricultural production, trade and commerce, and they encouraged the growth of industries and markets. The governors also managed the allocation of resources and infrastructural development within their regions. And lastly, they helped in the expansion of the territory by planning and leading an attack on the targeted chiefdoms or kingdoms to expand the territory of the empire. With this, we've come to the end of our class for today. A quick recap of what we've done today. We've discussed the key personalities in Songhai Empire and we identified 3. We talked about the king and his functions. We've also talked about the ministers and their functions. And lastly, we have discussed the governors as another key personality in Songhai Empire, and we've also seen the functions and responsibilities of these key personalities in the empire. Until we meet again in our next class, goodbye and stay safe.